In this problem, we're being asked to integrate 1 minus cosine theta all squared from 0 to a half. To solve this integral, we need to figure out what technique we should use for this. Looking at the problem, you might initially be inclined to choose a u sub, so you might want to let this be u. But remember, if you let this be u, you need to have its derivative in the problem. So I would need to have a derivative of cosine, which is negative sine, negatives would cancel out. I'd need a sine theta. So I don't have a sine theta in the problem, of course, so that's probably a bad choice, right? I don't want to do that u substitution. So what could I do instead? Well, just looking at it, why don't we just try and expand this? Okay, so if we just distribute here, we get integral 0 to a half. Remember, this is equivalent to 1 minus cosine times 1 minus cosine. So if we go ahead and distribute, 1 times 1 would be 1, 1 minus cosine, and then another 1 in cosine would be minus 2 cosine, and cosine times cosine negatives will cancel out. I'll get plus cosine squared. Okay. So at this step, what would we want to do? Well, do I know how to integrate each of these terms now? Well, I do know how to integrate 1, right? That goes to theta. I do know how to integrate 2 cosine theta. Integral of cosine is just going to go to sine. But I don't have an easy rule to integrate cosine squared, right? This is going to be the hard one. So here, what do I need to do in order to integrate cosine squared? Well, hopefully we remember an identity. Cosine squared is equal to 1/2 1 plus cosine of 2 theta. Okay, so if we were to rewrite this, then everything here is integratable, right? We already knew the 1 was good, the 2 cosine is good. Here you'd have a half, which you could integrate, and then you'd also have a half cosine 2 theta, which you could integrate. It would just require us to do a u sub, okay? So again, I'm going to rewrite our integral here, 0 to a half, and I'm going to try and combine all these things together. So we have a 1, we have the 2 cosine theta, and then replacing this with this, you would have a half and then a half cosine 2 theta. Okay. All in all, I might just bring the 1 and half together. I'm trying to, make this as simple as possible for us to solve in the end. So the less terms, the better. 1 and a half would be 3/2, 2 cos, and then a half cosine 2 theta. Okay. So enough with the rewrites. Let's now actually solve this integral. So like we talked about, 3/2 becomes 3/2 theta. Negative 2 cosine theta. Remember, the derivative of sine is cosine, so the integral of cosine is sine. So this would be minus 2 sine theta. And then here we will just perform a u sub, right? So u is 2 theta, therefore du is 2 d theta. And so d theta is du over 2. What this means is, of course, if you go ahead and plug it in, you can show all the work. But I know that to get the d theta, I would need du over 2, which means a half gets presented into the problem, right? So right here, you're getting an extra 1 over 2. This is on top of this, right? So this is kind of separate. I was just doing cosine of 2 theta. We get an extra half. So in total, we should be getting a fourth, right? A half here and then an extra half. So this would be 1/4 the integral of cosine 2 theta, which I'm going to replace, of course, because this is cosine u, which we already know the integral of cosine. We did it over here. It was sine. So this just becomes 1/4 sine of u. And u was 2 theta. So again, kind of going all in, replacing everything, we get 1/4 sine of 2 theta from that integral. Okay? Then we need to evaluate this from 0 to a half. Okay? Not a big deal. Plug in the half. We get 3/2 times a half minus 2 sine of a half plus 1/4 sine of 2 times a half, which is just 1. All of this gets subtracted from when we plug in the 0. 3/2 times 0, that'll go away. 2 sine of 0, that'll be 0. And then a 4th sine of 0, which is also 0. Okay? So this, and this all go to 0. And then looking over here, what do we get? 3/2 times a half would be 3/4. 2 sine of 1/2 is just going to stay as 2 sine a half, right? We don't know what sine of a half is. We could plug in the calculator, but this is not an angle, right? If it was pi over 2, sure, but it's just sine of a half. And then 1/4 sine of 1, same deal. We don't know the value of sine of 1 off the top of our head. So this would be our final answer.